Okay, El Shaddai, said to mean God Almighty. It's an ancient God from primordial times, and it's mentioned in the Bible quite a few times. I believe El Shaddai is mentioned about 6 or 7 times exclusively, and then other times there's other El epitaphs like El Olam. And El Shaddai is said to mean God Almighty, but when you actually look into it, it's actually meant to be God of the mountains and had the strength of mountains. If you say, you'd look at something like that. So you check it out in the ancient Hebrew, and actually Shaddai becomes across as female. And that's odd. Shaddam would be a male, and Shaddai is a female entity. And so El Shaddai, God Almighty, all of a sudden becomes a female entity. You look into the Hebrew Strongs, and it tells you that Shad is a female's breasts, and that's where they got the correlation God of the mountain, and then the mountain is strong, and so they made it so it's God Almighty, but it's actually God of the breasts. It's not even male, so that's kind of odd. So who is the goddess now of the breast, I guess, and she would be in El's pantheon. El was the god of the area of Levant, the entire area there. And so this is El, and El is mentioned 230 times in the Old Testament, right here. And it's this guy. He's the father of them. He has a storm god son named Baal, a wife named Asherah, and a son. The son's name is Baal, and he's the lightning god, and everybody equates him to Zeus. He has a sister whose name is Anat, and it's also an Egyptian goddess, and she's looked at as being Diana, the goddess of love and war, and very fierce. And she was a goddess of love till some shit went wrong, and then she turned into the leading goddess of war. So yeah, kind of neat. So let's look at who is this, because this is where a lot of people get their things. And oh, by the way, so whenever you look at Genesis 33:20, it says El, the God of Israel. And how you get all these El epitaphs is El is either at the first or the beginning of the word. And so now all of a sudden it starts to become real evident who the Hebrews were worshiping the whole time here, with the secret names and all that, is El, Elohe, Israel. That is God, the God of Israel, that they try to say, but El is actually the name of the God of the whole area that they're in, the Canaanite God. Well, they say they hate the Canaanites. History is written by the victors, and what you get out of that is that they stole the Canaanite pantheon and then tried to call it themselves. And that's disgusting, to come to find that out this much later. And what you find in Baal worship is actually, this is what these Hebrews used to do, regardless of what you might think from this point on. They used to worship this and thought that it was God at one time, and that God wanted you to take, this altar is made out of brass, and you see the bull-headed devil-looking thing, and the flames coming out the top of his head. Well, I guess you can quite see the flames coming out the top of his head. And what's going on over here is these guys are stoking a fire up under it, and it's making this thing red hot. Now what's going to happen is this guy's going to drop the baby onto his arms, and the baby's going to wriggle and sear on his arms and then fall into the pit down here and get burned. And it's a holy sacrifice. This is the sacrifice of the firstborn. Now, it's generally done during festivals, and you'll look right here, these guys are shaking tambourines and rattles, making noises, trying to get these kids' attention here, because they are looking here and watching the fire, and looking up here and watching the baby, and realizing that they are next, that they're fixing to do this ritual thing, and then they're going to chunk them in there. They've been separated, and all these people are howling and making noises, and these people are blowing trumpets, and that's all to stifle out the noise of the parents and the people crying for losing their children. But you see a lady giving one up right here. Do you see her putting it up like, mine's next, mine's next? You see this right here? So this is Baal worship. And worse than that, you find out that the Canaanite worship of Baal actually is the origin of the word Baalism. Yeah, and it all goes back to these, Aryan people here, these Persian Jewish people back in the desert and stuff. And it's kind of a disgusting way to look back at you and everything, but I guess everybody had some. I mean, to this day, they're still eating people in Africa. But it's happened all over the world, and whenever people die in a plane crash and trapped in boats, and you hear stories all the way through the time. But so let's see who this really is. So this is going to be Inanna and Asherah. So let's just look up goddess of breasts, and you'll see who this goddess is that they had in their temples and worshiping it. It's like this goddess here, and they always show her with like multiple breasts, okay, like she's got multiple titties. And you remember the Greek people say that there was this animal and he had multiple titties, and that's how the kids originally started from, was that kind of thing. And you can find that there's another depiction of her here. She's got horses in here and stuff. That's a Titan monument of her. And she's quite often depicted, I mean, all the way through India. It's the same lady. Shiva temple. And God, look at these girls. I just looked up goddess breasts, so maybe I should look up something else. But let me try to pick up the pictures that are more correct. So here's Ishtar, Inanna, and you can see her cupping her breast, and she's kind of big in that ass, and a little thick, but a little pinched in the middle. She's chubby. They call her cow. I'm sure ladies today would just really love that. But these go all the way back to the Ubaid culture that seems to be the ancient people that are in Dogu statues that go back to 10,500 BC perhaps, and they're even shown, I believe, in the Arata area. So she's the goddess. She's got the snake, and you see pictures of her all here, and it's where you get a lot of that from, I guess, a lot of that iconography. So there's the one. I'm looking for one that has this depiction. So here you can see where somebody would say this is the land of milk and honey, right? And you get that from, so that is the lactating fountains, and she's the mother goddess of all, and the thing that got thrown out of the Bible. And in the Bible, in that exact area they were in, she's known as Asherah. Asherah. And here are pictures of her. And you see Asherah. Yeah, and Asherah's cupping her boobs and doing her thing, hey, she's hot. And she's the mother goddess. So, of course, this was looked at as being nasty by the Hebrews, supposedly, and they chopped down all the statues of Asherah, which a lot of them look just like this, and apparently don't have boobs hanging out. That the one that did was the fertility version. And, but it's all just blasphemy. You're worshiping a lady and everything. Why? Well, the ladies are the ones that make the baby and do the thing, and I don't know why. Okay, yeah. Now we're way past this, but you're familiar with the same goddess here, and you've probably seen this before. This is Asherah and her owls, or Inanna, Ishtar, Istara. It's what Easter's named after. Her festival was the 5th, and we still do celebrate it. Secretly, you ain't going to get away from it because Rome took over everything, right? Well, there's more to that story than that, actually. Rome didn't necessarily take over everything like you think. Rome actually, here's Asherah. They actually wrote the Bible, people. It's the reason that you see all these gods that are here, because I'll tell you what it is. El, that god there, is actually Kronos and Saturn. Sure enough. So let's look up that. Saturn. Well, it's going to show me that planet, and everybody knows the ring planet. Let's look at Saturn the god. Let's look up Saturn god El, and you'll find that that's the same guy. and he's also Kronos, because Greek and Roman got together. So here we have that depiction. And the Saturn were known as the satyrs, and y'all are probably familiar with satyrs. They're the ones that look like this half goat people. This is kind of a derogatory picture because these people were somewhat primitive compared to the Romans, and of course they would do this after a bunch of wars with them. Now supposedly the real reason they did this to them is that they were herding goats and that they wore goat skins rather than wearing fabric for the whole thing, and they said, well, you still wear skins, you're somewhat barbaric. But here they are in the area playing flutes. They were famous for having made music and flutes. And so here's your thing, but doesn't that look very Satanish? Satyr, this is a satyr. Saturn, really? The Chaldees called him Stir. It's where we get the idea of Mr. and Mrs. Yeah, I've got a video on that too. You can check it out. Also, it's where we get the idea of the mystery that everybody's been looking for the answer for a long, long time. And you think that our God was the solo God and he wasn't ever married or anything. And I'll show you one more thing. Yahweh and his is Asherah. And they've actually found a lot of these pictures now. They kind of hide it from Christians, but I think it's about time that we quit hiding stuff like this. There are inscriptions like on this thing right here that you can look at. And right here, you're giving sacrifice to Yahweh and his Asherah. It says it right there. Yahweh had a wife, Asherah. And what's the depiction that you get? Well, they show you that they're a cattle god. It's a cow dude, and there's a little cow boy, and his cow mama, and there's Asherah, and she's apparently playing on a lyre, like a harp, playing little music. Yep. And they got flies floating all around them. And that's weird because I remember 20 years ago looking up through this stuff and trying to figure out who Beelzebub and everybody was in that supposed, under the hell type thing. And Beelzebub ended up being this cow god that had flies around him. And I saw this same picture and they didn't have it tabulated or the inscription to go with it on the one that I saw. And it shows the fly next to him. And it said, that's what he looks like, Lord of the Flies. And he's got, horns, and he's the horn god, and that's where everybody always gets it from, and that there were more depictions back in antiquity. This one, by the way, shows it looks like Indian feathers, but really that is the fleur-de-lis on top of his head too, by the way. This whole area is called the Levant. So Levant is, in what culture do you think would have that word? French? Levant. So this is Yahweh and his Asherah. Here's another picture of Yahweh. Right there. And Yah, this is him, but tell me that doesn't look Greek. That's because that's where it comes from, people, and that's where all this came from. And El being Saturn and being all equated to it is all just a Greek story. After they killed the Hebrews, they took their stuff and twisted it into a story. Their original story was how they strayed and started worshiping the devil. Well, this story gets down to Saturn. And I tell you a weird thing, the ancient Phoenician word for the planet Saturn was Israel. And now that shows you right there whenever he calls Jacob that name and anything from past that. And the brand new Hebrew Israelites are going to have to learn about this real quick before they do something else silly. But Israel. You can look up this information. Sanchuniathon, Berosus, some of these ancient guys that were actually keeping up with history, and the only piece that didn't get destroyed, actually, apparently, has this in there. And if you want the real truth to Jesus Christ, look up my video called Josephus, Flavian Liar. And if you want the truth about Armageddon, look up Jesus Tells When He Returns. And you can see that. But this shows you the odd deception that's going on the whole time right here. If you don't think El has anything to do with the Israelites and, the Hebrews, then how come the Council of Gods is called the Elohim and you worship in a Temp El or a Chap El? and they have angels named Gabriel and Raphael and Ariel, and it starts to get to be the big elephant in the room that no one seems to have ever noticed, and they keep looking around and trying to figure out what is going on. And wow, I think it's about elementary that we find out and show this information, because our elected officials that are elected would probably need to know that. You know, the elders. All these L words. Well, the prophets came to fix them, didn't they? Well, let's see who the prophets are. Elijah, Ezekiel, Nathaniel. Is there a certain God from that area that seems to be eluding everybody? Maybe his son has something to do with electricity? Yeah, check out some more of my videos, guys. And if you like what info you got here, give me a like, subscribe, and we'll see y'all soon. Peace.